All right, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning.
I love to see y'all here. This is great. Can everybody see this TV all right?
Yeah.
Is anything in the way? If there is, we can move it around a little bit. That's what wheels are for. We can do that. All right, really glad that you're here. We're just really excited to share what's going on. Lawson has gathered folks, has got some things that she's going to start with just to give you an overview and then dive into what our experiences were like from some of the pilgrims too. But let's start with a prayer. The Lord be with you.
Also with you.
Let us pray. Precious Lord, Heavenly Father, in you we live and move and have our being. And this beautiful world that you have created, the many cultures and races and people, and the ways that you have shared your grace and enlivened faith throughout the world. Things we've been able to experience and things that we can share. Things that help us to grow. We thank you for being pilgrims and being on the pilgrim's way. May our feet continue to be guided by you and your word and the people who have helped to build our faith. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Lawson. We got somebody online. I can't tell who's online there.
Payday Bank.
All right, Dave.
What happened to you, Kay?
Where are you, Kay?
I'm in Charleston. So I'm glad I finally figured out how to connect this with the Zoom meeting. So I've got just a little tiny, it's not perfect. I can't get you on my full screen. I'll see if I can connect that. But,
We can see you now. We got the ranks. We can see you.
You look
So
perfect.
that's good.
good.
Because then there's some other chairs up here or in
We got
there.
some right here we can turn around.
We can turn around. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Well, then, yeah,
Bring
we
it
know.
over here like this, Ruth.
Yeah.
He goes in there.
Well,
Right here.
I'm sorry. There's no there and I don't
Yeah,
know that.
that's right. Come in here, Dan. We got
plenty of seats.
I'll get it.
They're basically designers.
Well, welcome to Italy. We're sorry that you couldn't fly with us.
Just check.
You may be real glad you didn't get to fly home with us. But welcome to our travels in Italy. So we wanted you to have a quick overview when we are talking about all these places. We wanted you to just get a glimpse of what we're talking about so that you wouldn't be left out. So we went to 4 big places. Rome, Assisi, Florence, and Siena. We also went to some more small hilltop villages like Cortona, but this is only 45 minutes, so we just can't cover it all. So we just hit the highlights. The highlight, of course, in Rome was St. Peter's Basilica. The first to arrive and probably the most excited was Doreen and John. And the last to leave. The last to leave. That will be the rest of the story. But what were we searching for as pilgrims? What did we hope to find? Why did we go to all this trouble and expense to go on this pilgrimage? Was it to find unbelievable architectural monuments in honor of Jesus Christ and his disciples? And on the very first day, we walked in St. Peter's Square. We were absolutely wiped out from the trip over because one of the people in our little area in the plane snored the entire night. So it's a big thing. Pardon?
Somebody sitting next to you. No, it was not. He didn't sleep.
I'm glad we didn't go into St. Peter's the first day because we were so tired. But look, St. Peter's at night. I mean, it just takes your breath away. And thank goodness when we were there, it did not rain at night. So we got to see the dome from our hotel. There was a patio that we could stand on and we could see the dome right where we were. When we did go in, it is huge. It is the biggest church in all of Christendom. And you just feel like as you step in the front door, the high altar is just football fields away. And then behind that, the bright light in the back is the back wall that lets in this bright light. It just takes your breath away. And underneath that big balcony looking type of thing, underneath that is St. Peter's tomb. Oh gosh, thank you. Uh-oh, help me. Oh, okay.
It just popped up that the internet was unstable.
Yeah.
Okay,
Does everybody have their internet turned off? Wi-Fi turned off?
yeah. So at this point, since my computer's not working at this point, let's have the Pilgrims chime in about what St. Peter's meant to them and what some of the art inside St. Peter's, maybe how it touched them.
I'll start and set the stage since I don't have much to say. But Lawson showed that picture of St. Peter's. And for those of us who had never been to Rome before, it was really spectacular to sit there and see what we've always seen on TV so many times, where the Pope makes his address and everything. That was a phenomenal feeling. And of course, the art, the frescoes, the sculptures, the paintings were just absolutely incredible. But as I shared with our group on our last night in Siena, I reckon it was, we saw some absolutely spectacular art and sculptures. But it really made you appreciate even more what we have here in Cassius with our somewhat simple, comfortable church. It just was nice to see, have the made it so good. From St. Peter's.
Thank you for sharing. One thing that surprised me, because we always hear about the paintings on the ceiling. Well, they're not really paintings, they're frescoes. And I never knew that. And I actually never knew the way you did frescoes on wet cement or whatever. Plaster. And so he was doing this, and he could only work in a small area before it all dries. And it was mind blowing to think about that when you saw how much he did at age 89. It was amazing. It was, still gives me the chills.
Well, the other thing that I noticed with me was just the number of people who walked to get into St. Peter's. I mean, it was truly amazing that we walked there. We were fortunate enough to have guides who were able to usher us to the front of the line, and we had tickets already prepared for us. But just to see the all sorts of humanity from all parts of the world that really want to be there, and that to me is I was struck by that. It got a little tight when you went inside the Sistine Chapel, but it really was to see so many different people from so many different walks of life, from various cultures and backgrounds that wanted to be there.
Well, thanks be to God. The internet's working again and as you first walk into St. Peter's, the very first statue to the right is Michelangelo's Pietà. And it completely, the whole experience, you're taken your breath away by the space, and then you come up to this intimate picture of the dead Jesus being in Mary's arms. And when we later went to the Uffizi and all the other museums and had an art historian talk about this, would any of the pilgrims be willing to say what they learned about Jesus's body?
Oh, well, because this is one of the most important things for me, I think, that I learned in this. First of all, the little quiz. How old was Michelangelo when he did this? 18.
Well,
Finished at 18. Finished at 18 years old. I think that's what this said. So if you think about that, that's amazing. But we stood at a replica of this in the Vatican museums before we went in to see the real one. And two or three things that struck me that I hadn't realized before. The first is Mary is much younger than you might expect the mother of a 33-year-old to be. And so this position, theologically, with incarnation, when Jesus was young, in her lap, and resurrection and death in her lap. So putting those two things together. One of the things we were told, described, is that you can see she is just holding him with one hand, holding his body. And that would be pretty hard for anybody to hold another human body with just one arm, which suggests that maybe there is some strength and some life returning into the figure of Jesus even at this moment, with his leg sort of holding up himself and the veins in his arm, which you can't see quite as well. So it's not suggesting that was what was happening, right? Actually in her arms at that time, but theologically and thematically, how life is returning even at this time of sorrow that she may not fully realize. So you think of Mary being told all these things before he was born, and pondered them in her heart when he was born, and then what she must be pondering now. It just sort of brought together these two things, like many pieces of art do. It's not just meant to be like a photograph, one moment in time, but a couple of different themes can happen. The artist can make that happen within one thing. So that's what I really began to appreciate about that. And even in her face, there is some sorrow, but it's not complete sorrow. Not complete sorrow. So feel free to add, other folks, what you remember from that lecture. But that was important for me.
Another fabulous work of Michelangelo's was in the Sistine Chapel. And this is on the wall behind the altar, on the flat wall. This is his portrayal of the Last Judgment. And of course, we all know about the Sistine Chapel ceiling. But this, I guess, because the ceiling kind of takes first place in people's attention, I think I was more captured by this. And so this was on the complete, from floor to ceiling, and on the right-hand side are the pictures of the damned. And this picture, I just couldn't get it big enough for you to see the various things. And then on the other side are those who will be raised to life everlasting in heaven. So that was a very powerful picture too. And unfortunately, the Sistine Chapel is so popular that it was
shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, it was like being at a Georgia football game. They kept telling you, be quiet, be quiet. That didn't happen. Okay, let's see. I'm going to go quickly through these. Just these Vatican museums had beautiful pieces of art. This is Judas kissing Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, Peter being crucified upside down because he said he was not worthy to be crucified in the same manner as his Lord. And this was at the Basilica of St. Paul's outside the walls. And this is where St. Paul is supposed to be buried. And it's another huge basilica. And there is St. Paul with his sword. And you see how small we are relative to him. And all the statues and everything inside was big too. But what caught my attention was where he is buried, and it's behind that screen. Above it, they had in a shadow box the chain that supposedly chained St. Paul when he was in Rome at house arrest. And so that supposedly was his chain. I don't know how they found that, but then after we went to these two places where the giants of Christendom, St. Peter and St. Paul, are buried, we went to a catacomb, and there were over 300,000 people buried in this one site, and they have catacombs all around Rome. And they had beautiful gardens up top, like this is the Good Shepherd. On the left, and this catacomb on the right was the Pope's chapel, and in that catacomb several of the popes were buried. And then in other places you would see the catacombs of people, just ordinary people who had been persecuted and killed for their faith. And we had a Sunday service in one of those little chapels, and that go down level after level after level after level. Matter of fact, I think in the fourth level, they have not been restored yet. So those places may not have been as vandalized as these places have been. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to add, when I knew we were going to go to the catacombs, I told Rob, I said, no, I think I'm going to opt out of that because I have a little bit of claustrophobia. And my friend Linda Quick found out that I felt that way. And she said, I've been in there. I have claustrophobia. You must go. And
Linda says you must go.
It was really magnificent. I mean, just the magnitude it's just overwhelming.
And along the lines of what Lawson was saying, one thing that, another thing that made this trip really special was Rob having services for us as we went along. As Lawson mentioned, we had a nice service in the catacomb. We had a service in Assisi in one of the caves that supposedly St. Francis lived in. All along the way, we would have these incredible places where we could have services, and Rob very graciously led us through that. That was really something, a real highlight of the trip for all of us, I believe.
Yeah.
And the catacombs led sort of, they were hidden and not discovered, I mean, till fairly recently, what, like the 1940s, was it? I can't remember. That nobody knew really, I guess the word had just changed, that all this was miles of trenches, or levels. And then, I don't know exactly how, do you remember exactly how it came to be? They found out all this was under there?
I bet they were trying to build a hotel.
It's a vineyard.
But too, they forgot them for centuries, and one of the popes decided to excavate them after they'd been looted and forgotten.
They've been
years. Then
Yeah, they had
the
been
Pope, came back in there and ordered that a lot of these the leftover remains be reburied outside, and then it was forgotten again. So
We did do something besides go see churches. We saw at least 13 churches, but we tried to see other things in Rome too. And there are some people you might recognize at the Trevi Fountain. And then Florid and Neil and Frank went to the Spanish Steps, but Frank was our guide, so he wisely put us at the top of the steps, so we had to walk down. Walk up.
It was a mistake, but it worked out.
And one of the best parts about Rome was the gelato. And I ate more ice cream in this 2 weeks than I usually do in an entire year, and it was worth every whit. Oh, it is good for you. Good for your soul. And this was our last night before leaving Rome, and we actually had a musician with us. And so the moon was, this is like the song, the moon, the studio, and the moon was full. We had our nightcap up on the rooftop with John serenading us. So it was lovely.
I carried that mandolin all over it. It was worth it.
It was great.
So before we go to Assisi, are there any questions the peanut gallery has? Okay.
You don't like that. Peanut gallery, test me that.
Well, I told you I wanted you to go to Italy with us, and they serve peanuts on the flight.
So they did.
Okay. Before going to Assisi, we stopped at a vineyard, the Dinigi vineyard outside of Assisi. And since I'm not much about wine, I'm going to let all of my other pilgrims chime in.
Well, I didn't drink any of the wine.
Sounds like
The wineries were a lot of fun. We put 2 or 3 little wineries, and they would put on these great 3 or 4 course meals and serve different wines with them. And at this particular winery, I think Rob, you'd been there before, right?
Yeah, we went there. Our tour manager from last year set us up to go, and we wanted to make sure y'all got to taste it too. You know, Tuscany gets all the credit in the States for wine, but this is Umbria, a different region and a different wine, a grape, San Valentino. And it was really nice to share that with everybody.
It was a great tour. The other part about that particular venue was, I think it was our first or second introduction to the Italian 3-hour lunch. Numerous courses and a different type of wine with each course.
After which they will sell you a whole case to come home. Because they were victimized by that. Where's
The other thing that was neat for us first timers, seeing all the olive. A bit of land as big as this room, they stick olive trees on it, so they were everywhere. And we had a lot of olive oil as well as wine.
And the harvest for the grapes, it was over by that time, but they were harvesting the olives throughout the time. They would shake they would have little vibrators that would come up and it would drop into the bucket in the trees, and they're right there. They did.
The lady said that they no longer had a lady stomping the grapes.
Lucy and that
Little mythology.
I love Lucy.
All righty.
Oh.
At this moment, I will turn the program over to Doreen after I give you a few little facts, because Doreen's heart was maybe left in Assisi. This is a picture outside of Assisi of St. Francis preaching to the birds. He was born in 1182 and died in 1226, so he was only 44 years old when he died. But in that time, he formed 3 orders. The Order of Friars Minor, that was his group. The Order of Poor Clares, that is the female order of people following Francis's 3 vows, which were poverty, obedience, and chastity. Then they had what they called a 3rd order of Francis, which was developed much later in his life. For regular folk, working folks like us who didn't have time to be in a convent or a monastery, they had to work to live, they had to work to feed their families. But they saw the beauty in his lifestyle, so they became a member of his order. So with that, Doreen.
This was a lifelong goal of mine to go to Assisi. I had the grace to be born on October 4th, which is St. Francis' feast day. So he has been sort of my patron saint forever. And just looking at that beautiful sculpture and the birds, I actually sort of credit St. Francis for my love of birds, which Gloria knows all about.
I'm scared to death of birds.
I used to keep a log of every bird I saw every day for years. And then when the bears started intruding and the raccoons, I don't do it anymore, but I attribute my love of the birds to him. So I thought, I know a lot about St. Francis, but there was one thing that I did not know, and that is about the Chow cross. Now, I knew about the Chow cross because it's a recurring clue in the New York Times crossword puzzles. If you want to pass that around and back. But I never knew that it was related to St. Francis. So I'm going to read just a little something here. St. Francis of Assisi was known to sign his letters and blessings with the Tau. The sign is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet and symbolizes salvation in the Bible. In the book of Ezekiel and in the book of Revelation, it is a prophetic sign of salvation as it bears a resemblance to the true cross. And the Lord said unto him, Go through the city of Jerusalem and place a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry. But come not near any man upon whom is the mark. The love for the Tau was a love that sprang from a passionate reverence for the Holy Cross of St. Francis, for the humility of Christ, which was at the heart of St. Francis' meditations. The Tau also symbolized his salvation and Christ's victory over evil. Today, the Tau has become the symbol of Franciscan spirituality, expressing a love for peace, joy, and everything God created. So he wore this Tau cross, and all his friars, and that was their sign. And I now have my own beautiful little Tau cross.
Allison taught us about it during her class, and she said that the Crusaders wore that look, that outfit, and that this was the peace as opposed to the war.
So I made some copies of this if anybody else would keep it around.
Thank you, Doreen.
Can I show you my cross? It's not like gold, like hers. But it really was so important to me to express my faith at that time that I never thought I would ever wear a bracelet with a cross. But I was moved so much that I wanted to have some remembrance of this occasion. So this is handmade in Assisi. And I'm just so proud of it, and I wear it every day.
Good.
Anybody else about St. Francis? Well, our computer is, having some fatigue, jet fatigue. So I'm just gonna tell you a little bit of what's on here. St. Francis was a forerunner in many areas. He really struck me like a ton of bricks because he said, poverty is a gift. I always, before this trip, considered poverty a blight. Something we try to get out of, which we surely don't want to be in it unless we choose to be in it. But he felt like it was a gift. It meant you had to depend upon God because you had no resources of your own. And that just spoke to me because he chose poverty. He was the son of a rich cloth merchant, somebody like who owned Brunswick and Feet, or said, I mean, top line cloth. He was a very, very, very rich merchant. And Francis gave it up, and he gave it up to help the lepers in Assisi. There was a leper colony down on the plain. Assisi's halfway up a mountain. And there was a leper colony kind of in the marshlands. And he gave up all the riches that he had and all that he would have inherited from his father to go tend to those lepers and to people that the world will pass by. And what it did for me, it reminded me of the parable of the Good Samaritan. St. Francis would have been the person who did not pass by, but stopped to help the half-dead Jew on the side of the road. And that was one of the things he would tell his friars. Look for the people that are on the side of the road. Look for the people that nobody else cares for. And that is who God is calling us to love. So that was one thing that just really caught me because I'm so interested in security. The fact that, and what our work provides for us, a secure home, enough food, money to educate our children, and to have somebody consider poverty as a gift, really, that would be my take-home point from this pilgrimage.
Plus, I'm gonna have a suggestion,
Okay.
since our computer is not behaving, no, it's not behaving.
Okay.
That's not projecting onto there.
All right.
Maybe if, since we're doing this next week too,
Okay.
we can hope for better on this next week. And we can just hear from, as we had talked about, from some of our
Okay.
pilgrims, whether it's up until this point or on the trip itself, they could introduce themselves and just share a highlight or two, go around, and we could take any questions in from the group. Is that all right to do that? Okay. John or Maggie, sure. Start? Yeah.
We learned about this trip, probably a lot of the other fellow pilgrims had heard about it before. We kind of came, signed on late. But anyway, and when my Maggie came home and suggested it, my daughter, said, Dad, why don't you go? And I said, well, this is a good thing, a pilgrimage. I've been to Rome and Florence before, and we'd seen a lot of the artwork and so forth. This will give a different bent on going over there. This would kickstart, rejuvenate my faith, and I thought this is a good thing for us to do. And so when I went over there, I have to say I was conflicted because of visiting the cathedrals. As we said, 13 of them, and some of these beautiful basilicas and the artwork by Michelangelo, Donatello, Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, you just cannot put any more emphasis on great artwork than you find in those places. So here I was struck between, I wanted the message of what we were there for. And here I was seeing all this opulence, the Sistine Chapel and Donatello and his work and Michelangelo's work and all these, I mean, gajillion dollars worth of things. And I was having a hard time, you know, and then I got to Assisi and it was more clear because it was more simplistic and gotten rid of all the other things, and it was just about God's love and his love for us. And at that point I thought that's what this was all about. But then I thought about like church and over 2,000 years old, or you know how old it was, and I thought that and Rob brought this up, that the artwork, because the people couldn't read and write, the artwork brought the story of God's love and Jesus' sacrifice on the cross for us to the people. And so that was taken, although it finally wound up getting collected in all these opulent basilicas and so forth, it didn't speak to me of the simplicity of the message. Anyway, I'm still wrestling with all of it, but that was my take on it.
It's the same lesson.
Maggie,
It was a beautiful, fabulous trip. But what's really hard for me was to go to all the basilicas and cathedrals and everything. There were just gazillions of people. And I just thought, guys, and then I guess it was probably God had told me, saying, these people aren't just hanging around, they're coming for the same reason you are. And I just thought, how wonderful, all these people are there to love God and to be with him. That's wonderful. It was because when you walked into the cathedral, they had these huge, big open areas, and then you go into what I call the altars. And there's a reason they have that, because so many people come to see these beautiful things. And to me, it was the beginning of churches many, many years ago, and it was just really, it was really wonderful.
I would echo everything that these guys said. Maybe mention three things that were also pretty neat. The first thing was we all had a group of 14. It wasn't a large group. And most of us knew each other a little bit. I hadn't seen this guy in about 40 years.
Still looking good.
It was neat the way our group came together. We were together, as I mentioned earlier, for devotions every day. A number of us led the devotions, and we had some spectacular deliveries from, not from me, but from a lot of the other people that gave devotions. But the group just really came together, like Kay Maybank, who is on the screen there. I'd never met before this trip, and we got to be best buddies after 2 weeks together in Italy. So that was another high point of this trip. A second thing, this guy right here is an artist, and believe it or not, at the end of our trip, he presented each of us with a watercolor painting of something that was special, like ours in the Assisi, I think, beautiful town. But he just somehow found the time to paint these paintings. Look, he told him one up. Well, thank you, Katie, for showing that. Appreciate that. And lastly, it's a small world. We were having dinner one night in a hotel in Assisi, just down basement room, and pretty much just us. There was one couple way over in one corner, and there's one guy by himself drinking his wine, just enjoying the peace and quiet. And as we were walking down, that guy got up and said to himself, I recognize that voice. And he recognized Lawson's voice as we were coming down. And it was a guy named Frank Hanna, who actually has a home here in High Hampton, of all places. And Frank, a number of years ago, was able to purchase through a school that was needing money and had to auction this off. He purchased the oldest known copy of the book of Luke and John. It was from a papyrus found in Egypt, and I think it was dated about 125 AD. And he actually purchased it, had an audience with the Pope, presented it to the Pope, became good buddies with the popes. He's actually met 3 popes, had an audience with 3 popes. So after Frank was finishing dinner, Linda Wood went over and said, would you like to join us for dessert? And so Frank sat down with us and talked for what, 20 or 30 minutes about his experiences in finding this old papyrus. It was just a small world that we would meet. This guy on the other side of the world, and but he was there. He meets with the Pope, seems like every year, and this was one of his trips. So those are 3 things that were pretty interesting to me, in addition to everything else.
Okay.
Well, I found this to be absolutely an outstanding trip, and I had been fortunate enough to have been to Rome and Florence and Siena before. I'd never been to Assisi, which was the highlight for me. But this trip, the way it presented everything, tied it all together, all the artwork that you'd go on a trip and you'd see this and this famous work of art and that famous work of art, or you'd be reading history of Christianity and you'd read about this person or that person. This tied it all together in a way that it never had quite come together for me before. And I really came away too with the idea of St. Francis's role in kind of bringing the church together and bringing it out of its early stages into the Renaissance. I mean, the artwork changed at the time St. Francis was active and afterwards, and everything kind of changed, but his focus on bringing the focus of the church back to simplicity and love was and not the grandeur and opulence that had been in the past. Even though, of course, it came back and there were big churches built around things that had to do with St. Francis that everybody said, well, he would have hated that. But I thought that really opened my eyes to the history of Christianity and how we got to where we are today. And it made it all seem so much more real to me instead of just stories. Even though I'd been to Rome before and been to Florence before and seen all this time it really struck me as the reality of it. And I felt I had a human connection to the story, which was wonderful. It was great. And everybody on the trip it was a great group to be part of. And it meant so much to me to be able to be part of this group.
We've got about 4 minutes left. We're doing again this next week. So is anybody not going to be here next week that wants to talk today?
We're not.
Okay. Why don't y'all go? Yeah. Okay.
Where do you go ahead?
Well, I just, Assisi just blew me away. It just, the town and St. Francis and St. Clair, and some of the stories there, and the story about St. Francis praying, I think with cross was Santiamo, the cross, and he heard God's call to him to build his church. And he thought, and you all correct me if I'm wrong, but he thought that meant the building blocks, the stones. Mm-hmm. And then later on said, no, heard the call again, and to build it with people. And I think that this is our call as Christians, is that it is the community of Christ, it's the people. And that just meant a lot to me to think about St. Francis praying and hearing God's call and listening. If you don't get it right the first time, you get a second chance. You get to try again. And I love the story about St. Clair, who was so much younger, And, they didn't get to see each other very often, and there were rumors about that, I understand. But the story that because the weather was so cold or whatever else, that there was a kind of a parting of the ways, and he said, well, I'll see you in the spring when the roses bloom. And there were rose gardens right there, that the roses started blooming. So it was just a beautiful myth, story, fact, who knows, but it touches your heart.
Yeah.
It does. So that was just something that meant a lot to me to be there and to see all of that.
I would echo what you say about St. Francis. I think back to the gospel lesson about Jesus encountering the young ruler on the road, and he said, what else do I need to do to inherit the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus said, well, you sell everything you have and give it to the poor. And St. Joseph did that. And he truly gave it all up.
St. Francis.
St. Francis, yeah, St. Francis did that, and when I do remember, particularly Frank Kelly and I trying to get in this tiny cave where St. Francis slept on a rock slab that's about 5 feet long, and in the top of carved out of a mountain where it was cold and dreary, and you thought that's a pretty miserable existence, but that's truly the way, the ultimate sacrifice. He gave it all up. And what I hope we learn from this, and we went with, 4 years ago, all with with Lawson and Frank to Greece, and to walk the steps that Paul walked as we did, or walk the steps St. Francis did, hopefully it will inspire all of us. And granted, it's wonderful to see all the works of art. It's wonderful to see where he was baptized, where he was born, and where he is grave and all that. But really, what you hope is you can walk the walk. And can I repeat something I said when I gave my little devotional at the end? Is St. Francis said, "Preach the gospel, preach the gospel, preach the gospel, and if you have to, use words." So maybe that all of us can be inspired to really walk that way and be inspired by the trip. But I wonderful cohesiveness we had, and we had a really wonderful time together.
Great.
Thank you. Yeah, next week for round 2. Thank you for your time. If you've already been to church, don't forget to pass by the angel tree and pick up a couple of things on your way out. If you haven't been to church, come on over and get the angel tree afterwards, coffee or that kind of thing. Go in peace, love, and serve the Lord.
Thank you.